The Hawkins family didn't disappear, they were erased. And the truth about what was found in their house was never meant to exist. Because something inside that case was still alive. The Hawkins family case was never supposed to reach Detective Amara Kalu. It was sealed, locked, and officially marked as non-existent. But cases like that always find a way back. It arrived on her desk at exactly 3:17 a.m. No sender name. No department stamp. Just a single black file wrapped in old, dry red thread, like something used in traditional burial rituals. Amara didn't touch it immediately. She just stared at it. Because something about it felt wrong. Not legally wrong. Existentially wrong. Finally, she opened it. Inside were photographs. A family of 4. Smiling. Standing inside a normal-looking house. But the house was blurred in every image, like the camera refused to remember it. Under the photos was a single line written in shaky ink. They did not live. They were erased. Amara frowned. This is nonsense. But then she saw the location report. Or what was left of it. Hawkins residence, Blackwell sector. Her fingers paused. Blackwell sector had been burned down 12 years ago during a massive unexplained fire outbreak. Official records stated. No structures survived. No residents found. Yet here was evidence of a family still living there after the fire. Impossible. Amara leaned back in her chair. And that's when her radio cracked. Even though it was switched off. Static filled the room. Then. A whisper. Soft. Close. Don't open it. Amara stood up instantly. Who is this? She snapped. Silence. Then the voice again. But this time, it didn't come from the radio. It came from the file. She slowly looked down. The ink inside the document was moving. Not smudging. Moving. Like it was alive. One sentence slowly formed at the bottom of the page. You have been assigned. Amara stepped back. This is some kind of joke. But the lights in her office flickered. Once. Twice. Then died. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the fire remained visible. Glowing faintly. Breathing. A soft sound filled the silence. Footsteps. Inside the walls. Walking slowly, circling her desk. Amara reached for her weapon. But her hand stopped halfway. Something felt wrong. Her fingers were shaking. Not from fear. From memory loss. She couldn't remember if she had already stood up. Or if she had always been standing. The file flipped a page on its own. New text appeared. Case status, active inside subject. Amara's breath caught. What does that mean? A pause. Then. The voice answered again. Not from outside. From inside her thoughts. It means you are no longer investigating the Hawkins family. You are approaching them. The office walls began to distort. Paint peeling slowly like skin. Behind it. Something darker. Something that looked like writing carved into reality itself. Amara tried to move toward the door. But the door wasn't there anymore. Only a wall. Fresh. Newly built. Like it had never been an exit. The file closed itself slowly on her desk. And in the silence that followed, a final line appeared on its cover. Location confirmed, Blackwell residence. Amara felt a cold drop in her chest. Because she was no longer in her office. And somewhere far away, a house was waiting. A house that had already learned her name. Amara Kalu was no longer in her office. She was in a vehicle. But she didn't remember getting inside it. Her hands were on the steering wheel, gripping tightly, as if her body had been driving before her mind agreed to it. Outside the windshield, nothing made sense. The road stretched endlessly through thick African forest, but it wasn't a road she recognized. The trees were too still. No wind. No insects. Even the sky looked unfinished, like someone had forgotten to paint it properly. On the dashboard, the Hawkins file lay open. Even though she was certain she had closed it. New pages kept appearing. Writing itself. She tried to focus. "This is just a mental stress reaction," she whispered. "Long case hours, hallucination." But then the radio turned on by itself. Static filled the car. Then a voice slipped through. Not loud. Not distant. Right beside her. "You're closer now." Amara slammed her hand on the radio. "Identify yourself." Silence. Then, a soft child's laugh. Her foot pressed harder on the accelerator without her control. The forest around her began to change. The trees were no longer random. They were forming patterns. Like they were placed intentionally. Like a path was being drawn in real time. And then she saw it. Between the trees. A signboard. Old. Wooden. Covered in faded red markings that looked like traditional warning symbols. It read, "Blackwell Sector, Forgotten Land." Amara's chest tightened. That place was destroyed, she muttered. But the car kept moving. Even though she wasn't pressing the pedals anymore. The steering wheel turned slightly on its own. Guiding her. Like something was driving her for her. The forest opened suddenly. And there it was. A settlement. Not a modern village. Not ruins either. Something in between. Huts stood perfectly arranged in circles, like a ritual pattern. Smoke rose slowly from clay roofs. But there were no people walking outside. Only silence. Too perfect. Too controlled. Amara stopped the car. The engine died instantly the moment she parked. No delay. No spotter. Like it had been ordered to stop. She stepped out slowly. The air outside felt heavier. Thicker. Like it recognized her. Behind her, the car door closed on its own. Click. Locking her out. Amara turned back instantly. But the car was gone. There was only forest now. As if it had never existed. Her breath quickened. No, 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 no. Then, a voice came from inside the village. Soft. Calm. Familiar. You finally arrived. Amara turned toward the sound. A small boy stood at the edge of the settlement. Barefoot. Staring at her. Unblinking. She stepped forward carefully. "Where am I?" she asked. The boy tilted his head slightly. "You're inside what's left." Amara frowned. "What does that mean?" The boy slowly raised his hand and pointed at her. And that's when she noticed. The Hawkins file was no longer in her hands. It was carved into her skin. Not written on top. But inside. As if her body had become part of the document. The boy whispered. "The village remembers what the file writes." A pause. Then. "And now it has written you." The huts behind him creaked softly. Not like wood breaking. But like something inside them shifting position. Something alive. Amara stepped back instinctively. But the ground beneath her feet softened slightly. Like it was no longer solid. Like it was listening. And far inside the village, something began to move closer. Slow. Deliberate. As if it had been waiting for her arrival for a very long time. Amara Kalu followed the boy into the village. Not because she wanted to, but because her legs moved before her fear could decide otherwise. The settlement of Blackwell sector wasn't like any village she had ever seen. From a distance it looked normal, huts, pathways, smoke rising gently. But up close, nothing stayed still. The walls of the hut subtly expanded and contracted. Like lungs. Breathing. Amara slowed down. "This isn't real," she whispered. The boy didn't turn back. "It is," he said softly. "It just doesn't stay one thing for long." They stopped in front of a hut that looked slightly newer than the rest. Its door was already open. Waiting. Inside, the air was warm. Too warm. Like someone had just been there moments ago. Amara stepped in slowly. And immediately regretted it. A family sat inside. 4 people. A father, mother, and 2 children. All perfectly arranged around the table. Smiling. Still. Too still. The father spoke first. "Inspector Amara." Her body froze. "How do you know my name?" she asked sharply. The mother tilted her head. "We've always known who comes next." Amara took a step back. "I'm not part of this case. I'm investigating it." The youngest child giggled softly. But the sound echoed too long inside the room. Like it didn't belong to just one child. Like multiple voices were layered inside it. The walls behind them began to shift. Slowly at first. Then faster. Patterns forming under the surface of mud and wood. Scenes. Repeated scenes. The same family sitting again. But slightly different each time. Older. Faded. Distorted. Amara's breathing tightened. What is happening here? The father's smile slowly faded. And for the first time, he looked tired. We were not killed. A pause. We were overwritten. Amara frowned. Overwritten by what? The mother stood up slowly. And as she moved, part of her arm briefly flickered. Like in losing focus. Like she wasn't fully stable. The village doesn't destroy, she said quietly. It records. The walls behind her rippled again. And suddenly Amara saw it clearly. Not a hut. Not a house. But a page. The entire structure was made of text. Lines forming wood. Ink forming soil. The roof breathing like a sentence trying to continue. Amara stepped back, shaking her head. No, this is not possible. The father pointed toward her chest. Then explain why you are already inside it. Amara looked down. The Hawkins file inside her skin was glowing faintly. Writing itself. Adding new lines. Slowly. Patiently. The boy from earlier appeared beside her again. His voice softer now. The house doesn't keep people. A pause. It keeps versions. The room darkened slightly. The family began to blur at the edges. Like a memory being edited. Amara whispered, versions of what? The boy looked at her directly. Of whoever opens the file. The moment those words were spoken, the table in front of them changed. No longer food. Now images. Memories. Amara saw herself walking into the village. Again. And again. Each version slightly different. Each one less real. She stumbled backward. This is not happening. The mother's voice echoed softly. It is happening every time the file is read. The walls began to close in slightly. Not physically, but conceptually. Like the space was becoming smaller inside her perception. Amara turned toward the door. But it was gone. Only a wall remained. Fresh. Smooth. Like it had never opened. The boy stepped closer. And for the first time, he looked sad. You're not inside the village, Amara. A pause. The village is inside the record now. And then, the house exhaled. And everything inside it shifted. Amara Kalu lost her balance for a moment as the floor beneath her softened, like wood turning into something organic, something aware. The room was no longer a room. It was stretching. Expanding. Like it was trying to remember a larger shape. The family remained seated. Still smiling. But their faces were no longer stable. Small flickers ran through them, like pages being flipped too fast. The father spoke again, calmly. You are adapting faster than the others. Amara stepped back, voice sharp. Others? What others? The mother looked at her gently. The ones who opened the file before you. A silence followed that sentence. Heavy. Wrong. Amara felt something cold crawl through her thoughts. No one else was assigned this case, she said firmly. It came directly to me. The youngest child giggled again. But this time the sound didn't stay in the room. It echoed outside. Through the walls. Through the village. Through reality itself. Then, the table began to change. Slowly at first. The wooden surface darkened, veins spreading across it like ink bleeding through paper. Amara watched in horror as the table stopped being a table. It became something else. A surface made of living records. Images rose from it. Not food. Not objects. Memories. Her memories. She saw herself as a child. Then as a trainee officer. Then her first case. Each moment placed neatly in front of her like items on a ritual altar. The father leaned forward. Everything you are has already been documented. Amara shook her head. No, you can't record a human being like that. The mother's voice softened. Not a human being. A pause. A continuation. Amara's hand moved suddenly. Not by her will. It reached toward the table. No, stop. But her body ignored her completely. Her fingers touched the surface. And the moment contact happened, everything fractured. Her memory of the village blurred for a split second. Then reformed. But something was missing. She blinked rapidly. What did you just do? The boy answered from beside her. We didn't do it. A pause. The record updated itself. Amara backed away quickly. This is impossible, you're inside my mind now. The father shook his head slowly. No. He pointed at her chest. You are inside ours. The walls began to shift again. But this time it was faster. More aggressive. The entire structure started behaving like it was being written in real time. Lines of unseen text flickered across everything, walls, air, even shadows. Amara's breath quickened. I need to get out. But the door was gone. There was only a smooth wall where the exit had been. Like it had never existed. The boy stepped forward again. And his voice dropped lower. You opened the file, Amara. A pause. Now the file opens you. The family began to fade slowly. Not disappearing. becoming less defined. Like they were being written into a different version of themselves. The mother whispered. The village is not a place anymore. The father added. It is a process. Amara felt her vision blur. Her thoughts were no longer fully her own. Words inside her mind started rearranging themselves. Like someone was editing her consciousness. The boy looked at her one last time. And processes do not end. A soft pause. They continue in the next version. The entire house folded inward slightly. Like a page turning. And Amara Kalu realized. She was no longer investigating the case. She was becoming part of the next entry inside it. Amara Kalu wasn't standing in the house anymore. At least, not in a way her mind could understand. There was no floor beneath her feet. No walls around her. Only endless layers of shifting text stretching in every direction like an infinite sky made of documents. Every word was alive. Every sentence was breathing. And somewhere inside that impossible space, her name was being written again. Amara tried to speak, but sound didn't form the same way here. Instead, her thoughts echoed outward. What is this place? The answer didn't come from one direction. It came from everything. The record. Amara turned, or thought she turned. Her perception followed a presence forming ahead of her. Not a body. Not a shape. More like a structure pretending to be meaning. It was made of overlapping pages, symbols, and broken sentences constantly rewriting themselves. The entity spoke again. Not loudly. Not softly. Just inevitably. You called it a case. A pause. The space around Amara shifted. Scenes flickered through existence. The village. The house. The family. Her arrival. Each moment looping like pages being flipped too fast to read. It was never a case. Amara's thoughts tightened. Then what is it? The entity expanded slightly, and reality responded like ink spreading on paper. A containment narrative. The words hit her like pressure inside her mind. Around her, countless pages began rotating, each one filled with names, events, and erased histories. Amara saw something horrifying. The Hawkins family wasn't unique. There were others. Hundreds. Thousands. All different names. All different locations. Same structure. Same pattern. Same ending. Amara whispered, "How many?" The entity answered immediately. "As many as are needed." A silence followed. Then, one page drifted closer to her. It opened by itself. And she saw it. Her own file. Not as investigator. But as subject. Amara Kalu. Status, active entry. Her breath caught. "No, that's not possible." The entity responded calmly. "You think you entered the record?" A pause. "You were assigned to it." The pages around her shifted violently for a moment, like reality correcting itself. Amara felt something slipping inside her thoughts again. Memories flickered. Her office. The file. The radio whisper. The village road. All of it felt less stable now. Like it had already been edited once. The entity continued. "Everything inside the record can be changed." A pause. Including the reader. Amara stepped back instinctively, but movement didn't function properly here. Distance wasn't physical anymore. It was conceptual. The more she resisted, the more the record adapted. Pages folded around her slowly, forming a structure that resembled the village again. But imperfect. Incomplete. Like a draft version of reality. The entity spoke one final line. You are not inside the Hawkins case. A pause that felt endless. You are inside the system that produces it. Amara's thoughts began fragmenting. Her identity splitting into multiple versions. Detective. Subject. Memory. Line of text. She tried to hold on to herself. But even that was being edited. And then, a new line appeared in the record in front of her. Writing itself. Slowly. Deliberately. Amara Kalu, status, being rewritten. Her voice broke internally. What happens to me now? The entity's answer was almost gentle. Almost final. You become what is needed for the next entry. The pages collapsed inward like a closing book. And Amara Kalu's name was no longer complete. There was no silence anymore. Only revision. Amara Kalu didn't feel like she was falling or rising, those concepts had stopped existing. She was being rearranged. Piece by piece. Thought by thought. Until everything around her stabilized into something new. A vast, endless space made of floating pages stretched beyond perception. Every page was alive. Every page was writing itself. And every page carried the same symbol. 3 overlapping circles. The origin mark. The system signature. Amara tried to focus, but even a focus felt unstable now. A presence formed in front of her, not walking, not arriving, just becoming noticeable. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a spirit. It was the logic behind all things written. It spoke without sound. You have reached the source layer. Amara's thoughts trembled. What is this place, really? The answer came instantly. The record. A pause. The pages around her shifted violently, revealing countless embedded stories. Villages that never existed. Families that were erased. Investigators who arrived and never left. Amara saw them clearly now. Each one looping. Each one repeating. Each one slightly different, but always ending the same way. Her breath turned uneven. This is happening everywhere. The entity responded calmly. It is happening wherever it is needed. Amara's mind sharpened. Needed for what? A long silence followed. Then, the pages rotated slowly, forming a single structure in front of her. A sentence. Not written. Declared. Reality is maintained through documentation. Amara froze. The entity continued. What cannot be destroyed is recorded. What is recorded can be controlled. What is controlled can be repeated. The meaning hit her slowly. This isn't a village, she whispered. It's a system. The entity didn't deny it. Instead, it expanded. And suddenly Amara saw the full truth. The Hawkins family was never special. Omadora was never unique. Every case she ever worked on was part of the same structure. Different names. Different faces. Same rewriting process. Amara stepped back instinctively, but there was nowhere to step. Space itself had become text. The entity spoke again, softer now. Almost like explanation. You call them missing persons. A pause. But they are updates. Amara's voice cracked internally. And me. The pages around her shifted again. Her own case expanded across them. Not as memory. As current operation. Amara Kalu, status, active entry. Her identity flickered. She felt herself being divided into versions. Detective subject memory fragment sentence correction. No, she whispered. I'm real. The entity answered without emotion. Reality is the version that remains after editing. The pages began closing inward like a book finishing its chapter. Amara's consciousness fractured. But before she was fully absorbed, she saw one final page forming in front of her. Slow. Deliberate. Unavoidable. Case status, updated. And beneath it, a new line began writing itself. Not hers. Not the Hawkins family's. Something else. Something waiting for the next reader. Tell me in the comments, was Amara ever real, or just another written entry?